Expose Evil here. Like, share, subscribe. Today I'm making a video exposing the Queen of Heaven as used twice in Jeremiah. Once in Jeremiah 7:18 and the other Jeremiah 44:17. I encourage you to go look up the commentary on Jeremiah 44:17 because I'm only going to do it on the other one. But first, let me say the Queen of Heaven is not to be mistaken with Mary, the mother of Jesus. Now, the children gather wood, and fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough, to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings to other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. I'm going to go right into Eliot's commentary for English readers. The Queen of Heaven, the goddess thus described, was a kind of Assyrian Artemis, identified with the moon and connected with the symbolic worship of the reproductive powers of nature. Its ritual probably resembled that of the Babylonian Aphrodite, Mylitta, the mother goddess, in its impurities, and thus provoked the burning indignation of the prophet here and in Jeremiah 44:19, Jeremiah 44:25. The word rendered cakes and found only in connection with this worship was clearly a technical term and probably of foreign origin. Cakes of a like kind made of flour and honey, round like the full moon, and known therefore as celents or moons, were offered like the manchar or minchar. Sorry if I butchered these words, or meat offerings in the Mosaic ritual of Nidir, and the Egyptian worship of the goddess Neith, at Athens to Artemis, and in Sicily to Hecate. The worship of Ashtaroth, Milton speaks of her as Astarte, Queen of Heaven, with crescent horn. Through the kindred nature was not identical with the Queen of Heaven, that name signifying a star and being identified with the planet Venus. Now, Venus was the one who was in love with Tammuz or Adonis, same as Aphrodite. Now, before we go into that, let's say something about this star. Right? It says Queen of Heaven, that name signifying a star. Mean the same thing as Amos 5:26 or Acts 7:43. Acts 7:43 uses Remphan, and here they use Chuan, and both identified with Moloch in both verses. But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chuan your images, the star of your God, which you made to yourselves. We go down to Benson's commentary, and we see, but ye have borne or did bear the tabernacle of your Moloch and Chuan. Your ancestors manifested their want of their true devotion toward me, in that they were so prone to practice those idolatries which they learnt in Egypt, or which they saw practiced in the countries through which they passed. See Numbers 25:2, Joshua 24:14, Ezekiel 27, Ezekiel 20:16, and Ezekiel 23:3, Ezekiel 23:8. As these words are quoted by Stephen, Acts 7:42 and 7:43, to prove that God gave them up to worship the host of heaven, it is probably that by Moloch is meant the sun, which the whole East worshipped in ancient times, called also, as almost all interpreters agree, Baal, Belus, Baal, the Lord, as word signifies in Moloch, the king of heaven. Let me stop right there. Being the same as the other word Chuan, rendered by the LXX Remphan and Remphan. According to Vossos, it signifies the moon, but Ibn Ezra understands it as Saturn. Now see, the star of your god Saturn, or star of your god Chuan, or star of your god Remphan. Remphan and Chuan are Saturn. Now Saturn will be also known as Kronos. Venus, It gets confusing. Okay, so hold on. Now keep Saturn in mind. So I'm gonna go show you the star. Now this is the North Pole of Saturn. This is what's believed to be the star of Saturn. Now I totally understand if you don't believe anything NASA says. Okay, but this is known as the cube of Saturn, or the 6-point star, or the hexagram. And on the South Pole, you will find something that looks like an eye. They call the all-seeing eye. This shape is naturally on Saturn all the time. Hexagram, you got obviously with some geometry, you can make a 6-point star. You can make a cube, as you see in other pictures. And we continue here. It understands it as Saturn, right? Saturn, interpreted which many learned men approved. See particularly Lud de Duth upon Act 743 and Dr. Spencer de Log Herbury, Lib 3 Cat 3, where it is shown that Saturn was called Rephan or Remphan by the Egyptians. Alright. Now I'm back at the commentaries for Jeremiah 7:18, and we're back at the end where I'm showing you signifying the star. How that might be, well, it's obviously the same as Saturn, which is tied into these crazy mysteries, Mystery Babylon. Now it says Venus, right? Now Venus was in love with Tammuz or Adonis, and Tammuz or Adonis was exposed in Ezekiel 8:14, the weeping for Tammuz. This is because Venus was weeping for Tammuz or Adonis when he was murdered or died. And this signifies sun, the sun worship. And she was the moon. Like the originals, Nimrod, the sun god, and Semiramis, the moon goddess. This is their sun, which is Tammuz. Okay? Tammuz, a magician say some, a handsome young man, but notorious for love of women, say others. An adulterer, say some, slain by his brother, king of Egypt, and mangled in pieces. 13 pieces, because Nimrod was killed and chopped into 13 pieces. Whose torn members were thrown into the river, but gathered up by the fond idolatress, and rites of worship fitted to so lewd and idle. I don't know if you know Isis, which is the same as Venus. She, her brother and husband, Osiris, was killed by his brother, Set, in their myth. And she found his reproductive organ and impregnated herself with it. Yeah, so it's crazy. So, whose torn members were thrown into the river, but gathered up by the fond adulteresses, in rites of worship fitted to so lewd and idle, whose adulteries lascivious, sorry if I butchered that, practices and immodest gestures, these she priests acted over before the idol with men of like lewdness, of whom what they received as rewards of their prostituting themselves was offered to Venus. By this means God's temple was torn into a lewd stews. I want to show you from A Dictionary of Satanism by Wade Baskin how they define Queen of Heaven, a presiding deity worshipped by modern witches, also known as the Queen of Heaven and all living. And Saturn Square, a magic square used to attract Saturn's influence. It is the oldest magic square known and appears in I Ching. It consists of 3 rows of 3 figures because Saturn is the third sephira or agency through which God manifests himself in the production of the universe. Now, they're not talking about Jesus, okay? Do not get that confused. Their God is Satan. Alright? They're talking about the Kabbalah. It's the third sephira, or whatever you want to call it, of the Kabbalah. Those 9 or 10 squares